A very good evening to one and all present, and welcome to a brand new episode of VUTV by Vijaybhoomi. This is a series that I look forward to on a weekly basis, where on every Thursdays, I call it the Enlightening Thursdays, where I chat with eminent educators and thought leaders and get them talking about their vision, about the future of education, and about what are the new evolving trends that we're seeing today in the Indian education system. From the time I think we have started VUTV by Vijaybhoomi, we have had close to about 200 plus conversations now with people from a diverse spectrum of fields, of professions, from education, from other professions as well. And I think I can safely say now that everybody has been propagating the fact that it is very, very important that we build independent thinkers in the years to come, because we're looking at having as many solution providers as possible. Critical thinking is one of the most essential skills that we need to develop and enhance in our students today. And while we were brainstorming about how we can get this sort of a topic on our forum and who should be our eminent guest on this panel, I think God was very lucky with us. We got very lucky. God was very kind to us, and we got connected with Dr. Jawahar. And I think this is one of the when I was going through Sir's profile, I was so intrigued by the wide spectrum of work that he has engaged in, the kind of contribution that he has made to society. He's a TEDx speaker, he's an advisor to the government, he's a startup mentor, a smart city speaker, a best-selling author, a CSR consultant, and one of the top policy makers that we have in India today. And while I was just looking at his profile, I said, we cannot get luckier than this in terms of finding a very inspirational thought leader who can actually help us and unpack this topic of how we can bring the art of thinking to schools. I mean, how do we integrate it in our curriculums today? How should we deliver the thinking curriculum to our students today? What kind of assessment should we have to evaluate the thinking skills of our students? So we definitely needed a visionary like him to actually throw light on this very, very important topic for us today. Thank you so much, Jawahar sir, for taking out the time and joining us this evening. We're truly honored to have you with us on this platform.
Thank you for having me.
And to all my lovely, viewers who are joining me, I'm sure all of you have a lot of questions for him, because, the topic is so thought-provoking. So please make sure you're sending me all your questions through either our social media platforms. We are picking them up from there, as well as on this platform. You can just send them to me as a chat message, and I will make sure I will incorporate it in my conversation with Jawahar sir today. So, sir, I would like to actually first invite you to give us your opening remarks on this topic today. If you can throw some light on what is the importance of introducing the art of thinking in schools. What is your vision for art of thinking? Like, how can we integrate it in the school curriculum today?
Okay, so as a introductory remark, I'll tell you why it started and how it started. So I was in the Columbia University, New York, as a keynote speaker. And there the president of Columbia University made a very cursory remark about India, that some of the people on stage had asked, why did you call an Indian for this prestigious address? So he was saying that no, Dr. Jawahar is a very known personality in US. He's done his research in the US. India's research is mostly cut, copy, paste. These are his remarks. And out of the 1,300 vice chancellors who were there in the auditorium, I was the only Indian there. So I felt very bad that he was talking about India in that. So I said, "Main is gore ko dekh lunga." That was the feeling I had inside. So when I came to speak, I asked a question. And the question was to all the vice chancellors, what do you teach in your pre-K, what we call here as nursery, KG1, KG2? One of them got up and said, we teach A to Z, 1 to 10. I said, A to Z is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is also fine. But when you teach the 10, have you taught the 0? Now the problem, and there was absolute silence. There was absolute silence there. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
audible.
yeah, yeah. So there was absolute silence there, and the auditorium was a pin drop silence. And then I raised this question: as teachers, as parents who are supposed to teach our children, if we do not question our teachers and our parents who have taught us 1 to 10, that we should be taught 0 to 9, that means there is something wrong in our system. We don't question our systems. We don't question our education system in particular, and that is the reason that thought does not come. So if my mother says, "Chalo mandir chalo," then today's child needs to ask, why should I go to a temple or a mosque, or what should I get? So that is the process that we need to put in our children. Not that it is to offend the religion or something like that, but the reasons on why we do something should be known to us, or why we learn something should be known to us. So that's the reason the art of thinking started.
Wow. I think, sir, I totally resonate with you. And in fact, I think most of the new age educators would really be inspired by what you said, because the idea is in these new age education spaces that we're trying to create today, we are trying to build that question of questioning respectfully, like understand the
Yes, yes.
reason why you're doing a particular thing. So that you kind of subscribe to why you're doing, and it's not a herd mentality that one is following, that because others are doing it, so I am doing it. Now,
Yes.
with that opening remark that we've set the tone of this conversation, according to you, sir, I mean, you've traveled far and wide. You have, the kind of experience that you have, the kind of people that you have met. Going forward, what do you think are the essential thinking skills that children need to necessarily be exposed to today? And necessarily, this is something that needs to be tackled in the Indian school education system today.
Okay, so we've made a very brief remark about this in the national education policy. At different stages of school and college, we'll need to put in these skills. I would name 4 of them. So one is convergent thinking. The second is divergent thinking. We'll get to what it is. The third is creative thinking, and the fourth is critical thinking. So at various levels of schooling and college education, you will need to put in these 4 skills into place, and this will not just improve the learning ability, understanding ability, or comprehension of the student and the communication. It will also improve the entrepreneurial abilities as well as the employability skills of the children. So I think these are the 4 that we can look into.
Correct. And sir, if I can, request you to individually throw light on each of these 4 different.
Okay. We'll take examples and it will be very clear to you.
Yes.
So let's say convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is I go to an exam like JEE or NEET or something, and there are MCQs so there is one question and there are 4 answers. I will need to converge on an answer which is to the best of my ability, the most correct one, and that is the outcome of convergent thinking. So you need to focus all your energy on one answer which seems to be the right. The second question, if I put to all of you, what can be the use of a barometer, let's say. So everybody will say atmospheric pressure, this, that, but that is the very convergent kind of thinking. So if I say, okay, if I go on the top of a building and throw a barometer down, will I be able to understand what is the height of the building? Obviously, yes. If you throw a stone, instead of that, if you throw a barometer, so divergent thinking is thinking widely on what are the possible but unthought of answers for any question. That is, so both these things are needed in a school system. The third is creative thinking. Now, creative thinking is, I'll give you an example again. So I was invited as one of the 8 innovators by the UN in Silicon Valley. One of them from India, that was me, and sponsored by Samsung. And the challenge was, how do we reduce the usage of water or wastage of water by 2030. This was the challenge. The rest of the 7 people were technical people, engineers. So some of them started talking about reverse osmosis or bringing water from the seas, etc., etc. Since I am not a very technical person, so I said, see, it might sound bad, but it's a daily thing that we do. So every day, the average which research says is that we shit once in a day and we go to piss 4 times in a day. And every time you flush 5 liters of water. So my answer was that if 4 to 5 times of a day you piss and every time you flush 5 liters of water, then why not have two buttons? Because for after a piss you need only 2 liters of water, not 5 liters, but you still flush 5 liters. So I'm saying have one big button, one small button. When you shit, press the bigger button, and when you piss, press the smaller button, and you save 3 liters every flush. So I save 15 liters per person per day, which is huge than any technology can tell you. So what I am saying is creative thinking brings you to solutions which might look very simple, but will be very effective. So this is something that is required in our children to look around and find solutions to the larger life problems and make it into a business or make it into a life lesson. Not necessarily business. So that is creative thinking. And the last is critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is when you are given a problem and the solution is different for different people. It will be different. So how do you think that you arrive at the solution? There are four major steps. I'm not going into it, but it is a very scientific way of thinking, which puts in a hypothesis. Then we look at the problems, then we look at the solutions, and we look at the outcomes. So that is critical thinking. Now, all these four thinkings are necessary.
Perfect. So thank you so much for explaining them so clearly with examples. I think that puts a lot of perspective into the different types of thinking skills that we need to inculcate. So, sir, according to you, how soon should we be inculcating these kind of different thinking skills? And especially now in the larger context of the national education policy that you see that now is available on paper. Now we're talking about implementing the same. Where do you see that this art of thinking is actually fitting into that current scheme of things today?
Okay, so earlier I was since there was nothing that was made of a mention like teaching thinking in schools or colleges. So I was since my association is with the Prime Minister's office, so I was pushing a 5-minute assembly every day, which would propagate the art of thinking. So I thought that I'll give a small problem, and then students would think for 5 minutes and then come up with a solution. But now that it is a formal part of the national education policy, I would still recommend that if you put this as a separate subject, then teachers will teach as a subject. And then what happens to moral science or sex education or whatever, it becomes a subject and people look for passing in the otherwise and nothing else. So what I am looking at is thinking as a transdisciplinary exercise across curricula, where the problems that we put on different, so if I am putting at geography, let's say, then in a square kilometer area, if rain is this much centimeter, what is the volume of water that will be collected on ground, provided the ground is not seeping, is not absorbing any water. So it incorporates geography as well as it incorporates mathematics, something like that. So what I'm looking at is that a transdisciplinary thinking skill exercise throughout subjects is something that we should look at from day one. It's not an easy task because the people who make the curriculum are the people who teach. And they themselves, the students are better off. I might be very wrong when I say this, but the students are better off thinking. Why I am saying this, I'll give you an example, and it happened to me. So it showed me a mirror on what I am saying. So I gave a lecture in a particular big school in Bangalore itself, and the students were impressed. So one of them came up after my lecture and said, "Sir, you have gray hair. You look to be very knowledgeable. But I want to ask you a question. Who is God?" I thought this boy, he was in 6th grade. So I said, I thought I can give a definition. But he stopped me before I answered. He said, no, 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 I don't want your answer. You enable a discussion between 10 of us of various grades, and we will understand what are the different meanings of God from different people. So he was not asking. So this is the kind of thinking that children have these days. I myself did not think of that, and I was trying to give a definition to God because I am from the old guard. So that is the reason why I am saying the children are better off trying to think the way we should think than us, because we are conditioned not to think.
Correct. I think so. A lot of people on the platform today would actually agree with that viewpoint of yours and would have had similar experiences with the younger generation. Which brings me to the next part of the question, which I'm sure a lot of people would have asked you this, especially on the policy front. Like you yourself identified that at the end of the day, the people who are delivering the curriculum today, right? They are people who have been, who come from a different system, who come from a different sort of context and a different kind of a learning ecosystem that actually developed around them. So in this point of time, when we're talking about something so transformational, we're talking about transdisciplinary education and how it needs to permeate through every level of school education system. How do you propose that we equip our faculty and our school educators and school administrators to deal with this challenge? Because this is also something that requires immediate attention.
Yes, this is of utmost attention, because we've had an experience in the government of CCE, continuous and comprehensive evaluation. When we started, we thought that we would like to free the children from any stress of exams. And the idea was that we thought that throughout the year, if we assess them, and we assess them in different ways, so that people who are auditory can orally give the exam, people who are kinesthetic can do something, people who are so all the skills. We wanted to test throughout the day. So there were role plays, interviews, this, that, drama, everything was there. But what happened, the teacher, because he was conditioned to take exams in a particular way, they took all the 8 exams written, and then they said we are burdened with 8 exams instead of 2. We need to correct the papers. Actually, that was not the way it was supposed to be done. So CCE failed. So I think we have lessons to learn, that if our teachers are not equipped and aware of what they are supposed to deliver, and they also do not think the way they are supposed to teach, then it will again fall flat, and then we are going to be waste. So what we are trying to do now is, yes, as policy makers, we don't think that way. It's a confession I am making. हम लोग बहुत सारी बातें बोल देते हैं, लेकिन we don't think that way. For example, I'll give you, there was one incident in which Chandrababu Naidu, if you remember, I was working with him as one of his advisors of Andhra, and every morning at 4:30, they would wake us up. There were 8 parameters that Naidu used to look at daily. So he said, 4:30 they would call us up, 6 o'clock sir ka presentation hai aapka on education, youth, etc. And somebody used to give electricity, etc. So one day the electricity guy, when he gave the reports of 1 year, Chandrababu Naidu found that there is 35% loss of electricity in transmission. It is known as transmission losses. So 100 kilowatt used to leave one place. By the time it reached, it was 65 kilowatts. But on one particular day, it was 94%. So Chandrababu Naidu thought that if it is possible on one day, why not it is possible on 365 days? So see, his thinking was very clear. So he said, what is the major? So they said that out of 35, 10% is transmission losses, and 20-25% is theft of electricity. He said, how we can stop? He said that there are pockets where it is stolen. So he said, put the STF and ask them to shoot anyone at sight who comes to steal electricity. And this was not a written order, but he said that don't shoot, but at least you stand there with guns thinking that they will shoot if you steal. So throughout the year, the efficiency rose up to 90%. So this is the kind of thinking that is required in teachers. Instead of saying कि ये बच्चा पढ़ता नहीं है, ये बच्चा बुद्धू है, ये बच्चा last bencher है, if you have one stray day when that boy has done well, then there is a possibility that I can do it on all the 365 days. This thought does not come to our teachers. So as policymakers, we are also at fault that we make a policy, but we don't know how to implement it. Second, we also don't practice our own policies. So forget about the teachers, the policymakers themselves don't practice, the ministers don't practice. So it has to be a top-down approach for such things, such radical things to happen.
Correct. So, sir, now since we are talking on the policy aspect of it, I'm sure a lot of people here, because it's something when we were sharing this topic in your profile on our social media platforms, a lot of people wanted to know, which is the implementation of the national education policy. So while we know it is a very revolutionary document, there's so many breakthroughs that have been made in this document in terms of altering the structure, altering our perspective on school education, on even higher education. But the question really is, how is this going to percolate to the grassroots level? So, because there is not much that, one can actually, witness in terms of, official documents, etc., that what is happening on the implementation front. So, sir, if you can throw some light on that how long do you think that we will actually be able to, implement this policy in spirit and in word, right to the grassroots level? What are the major obstacles that you're seeing at this point of time, and how are we tackling with it, at the government and the policy level?
Okay, so yes, it's a well-researched document, but it's still a document. The major challenge lies is that the federal structure in which we create the policies, the states will incorporate or implement that. That is the major challenge. Some states like Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Maharashtra or Karnataka, some of these states or Delhi for that matter are going to implement it well because they have the oiled infrastructure and they have people who can do it. But there are backward states who are fighting for their rights. They say that we don't want one exam because our levels are lower. So as a starting point of the thinking, these backward states think that we are lower than the others, which is a problem that I see. When you implement a uniform policy and a revolutionary policy like national education policy, the state is the implementing agency, and that is where the problem lies. So uniformity will not be there. You will see somewhere very good implementation, somewhere very bad. Coming to the timelines, 2022 is what we look at the starting point of this timeline. And within the policy, we have given dates of 2035 when all IITs are going to be multidisciplinary higher educational institutions. There are up to 2040 is the timeline. This is what we have said is the last milestone in the national education policy. So it's a long 20 year implementation or 18-year implementation that we are going to do. But again, like I said, the challenge is there. Second thing that I want to say is that while implementation happens at the state level, in this policy, we have named a lot of central agencies which are hand-holding. I am not saying monitoring, but I am saying hand-holding, like the National Research Foundation. So there is a foundation for research grant, there is a foundation for making curricula, there is a foundation for training, there is a foundation for technology. So we will be hand-holding all this, and then there are a lot of resources that the teachers will get free of cost, and trainings they will get free of cost. So the idea is to enable and give all the necessary arms and ammunition for the policymakers in the states and the teaching faculty to be able to cope with the revolutionary element of the policy. So we are trying our best, but 2022 is a milestone.
Very well, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing and throwing some light on that. Now, coming back to the topic that we are speaking about, which is the art of thinking. So this is one of the questions that we got from one of our attendees of this evening. And they would actually like to know from you, I mean, one of the things that you said that, especially with divergent thinking, is about, for students to be able to develop like a multiple perspective to a problem, right? You don't look at it in just one single silo-based approach. So how can we sort of open the minds of students, in this multi-perspective approach? How can this be done at schools? How can this be done at homes? Because we also have parents who are joining us. So they can also be great support systems in sort of, helping schools and, helping these great policies that we're trying to do, just sort of strengthening, because everybody's a stakeholder here. So
Very
how do
good.
you think we can, bring this to the school, individual school and home levels today?
Okay, so I'll give you two examples, one which happens at the state level and one which happens at the individual level of the students. And both are fantastic examples. The first one is mine, where I did not go to a school. If you have been through my TED Talks, etc. So I didn't go to school. I didn't have a formal schooling. So I was selling idlis. So when I was selling idlis at age 8, when the family was faced with a problem that we didn't have money, so my mother could only make idlis, so I had to sell idlis. So that night when I was 8, I was thinking, how is it that there are 11 hand carts which sell the same bloody thing, and I am the 12th person selling the same idli? How is it that I can differentiate? And then the divergent thinking started. I didn't know that it was divergent thinking, but it started. That how do I differentiate my idli from the other people's idli? So my handcart owner, his wife used to make pickles. And we had a deal that 10 bottles of pickles, if I sell, I will get one bottle as incentive, apart from the idlis that I sell. So I took out that in advance, the bottle of pickle that I was supposed to earn. And I used to like my mother's bindi. So I took out one pinch of achar and put it at the center of the idli. So it is like एक चुटकी achar की कीमत तुम क्या जानो, Ramesh Babu, Deepika Padukone says the same thing. I applied there,
Correct.
but it was before Deepika Padukone. So what happened now is that idli across the world has two characteristics. One, it is bland, and one, it has to go with sambar and chutney, and it is second is it is white. So when I put a dot of pickle there, red pickle at the center, it ceased to remain white. And it ceased to remain bland because pickle itself is spicy. So
Correct.
my idli started selling like hotcakes. So that is some example of divergent thinking, is that if we let our children be, divergent thinking is going to come whether you are in school or at home or any. But we don't let our children be. Our teachers don't allow us. Our parents do not allow us. They are after us to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Which is actually, I am coining this word as rote thinking. So this rote thinking is, however, I have practiced it for so many years. I teach my children to think the same way, which is not the right thing. So let them be. And you see that in small children, they try to find out ways of playing with toys. So they will look at a carrot and take it as a gun and play. That is divergent thinking. So I think they are born to be like that. So let them be as they are instead of forcing ourselves on them, and we will have divergent thinking in them. So I would propose that in the games period or in some period, I don't have any example for this, or let's say in ninth class, if you are teaching laws of motion, I would, as a teacher who is not gone to school, do it this way. I will take them to the cricket ground and take two timers, 50 rupees each, very cheap for a government school also. And when I release the ball, the timer is on. When the ball lands, the timer is off. And now what we teach in our classrooms, v is equal to u plus at, v is final velocity, u is, and this is how we teach. I can do it on ground and say the initial velocity is 0 when I am throwing. The final velocity, I will find out. The distance between the two wickets is 22 yards. I know that. So why not teach laws of motion on a cricket ground? That is
Absolutely.
transdisciplinary. That is So this is one example of individual thinking. We have it innate ourselves. The second and very heart-rending example is when I was doing a program called Kya Banoge Munna. Munna or Munni is the same. There is no gender bias in this. So I used to talk in Mufassil areas to the tribal boys and girls of 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. And we used to discuss 2,500 at a time. The minister was with me. When the minister was there, secretary was there. I am not naming the state. So when we went there to one of the areas, then one boy got up and he stood with his hand on his kamar And he stood like a hero. And he said, "Kya banoge Munna?" I asked. He said, "I want to become a Naxalite." So the whole audience was shell shocked. Are he's talking in front of the minister, and the minister had introduced me in very high words. So everybody got panicky because the minister was there, the whole officials were there. So the principal started scolding that boy. The boy started crying. Then I had to intervene. I said to the minister, "See, I asked a question, Kya banoge Munna?" The boy is answering. So it was between both of us. Why all of you are getting into it? Let me deal with him. So I asked the boy separately, what is it, sir? He said, "Sir, nothing wrong in what I am saying. Please understand what I am thinking." He said, and it was revolutionary the way he thought. He said, "Ki sir, I in our school there is a private institution that is running a school computer lab. And when I went to them and said that I am in the 11th, please teach me computers. I want to become a computer." The lab said that till 10th, only boys are allowed free computer education. For girls, it is till 12th. He tried to argue. He said girls will get married in villages. They won't use this. Teach us, at least we'll get employed. They said, no, 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 that is government policy. So they said that we can teach you if you pay 10,000 rupees. So this boy went, we've crossed our time limit, I thought. So this
No,
boy
that's
went,
okay.
and said, 10,000 rupees I can't pay. So he went home and thought, my father's annual income is 10,000 rupees and we have a family. I am not the only one. So how is it that we'll fend? So he thought, let me choose a career where the equipment is free, training is free, and that is why he chose Naxalism. See, the problem is, till that moment, the policymakers didn't think that children can think this way. That I can help my parents by becoming an Naxalite because the training is free. The thought process was right, but there was no hand holding for that boy. And the policymakers that day decided that till 12th, boys also will be given computer. So it is on our part, we do not think in our AC rooms what the child at the end, the consumer at the end needs. And that is where these children think very beautifully. The thought process of that child to help his father was so nice that he didn't want to forego his career because there was no money. He found out ways. With all appreciation for that boy, if we as teachers are able to help children think the way they think while hand-holding them to go in the right direction, we have winners with us.
Absolutely. I think so. That's a very, very, I think, thought-provoking sort of an instance. And I'd like to thank you for sharing that with us, because this really shows, I mean, you very correctly said that sometimes we are so stuck up in our high ivory towers that, we are actually not connected to, what is the reality that is, actually on the grassroots level. Yes. So I think that really this just changes a lot of the ways and a lot of the mindset, I think, that we have today. I understand we are running out of time, but, I definitely have to ask you this one final question, because I think this must be plaguing on everybody's mind, which is that, sir, if today we were to ask you that what are the top 3 things that you think we need to change on an immediate basis to create solution providers of the future in the current scheme of things. So those top 3 things coming from you, sir, what is it that you would like to change on an immediate basis if you had that magical wand in your hand?
Okay. So if you are leaving it to my imagination, I would say, I would like to change one, the way teachers teach in class. Absolutely, it has to be 360-degree. It has to come back again to a way where the teachers will allow some freedom to the student to breathe, to think. And that is one. The major part is that. The second is the way our parents think. There are misconstrued priorities. So when you go for admission to a school, the parent would say, is the bus having an AC? How is the lift working? Which are not connected to your education at all. So I understand that you are very concerned about the comfort of your children, but please understand that the education is there to be taken from the school, not the lift or the AC. So that is something that I want to change. And third is the way we make policies. The government makes policies, and a majority of that comes from the fact that the average age of a parliamentarian is 57 years, whereas the average age of India is 35 years. So any policies to be made for young boys and girls cannot be made by us. We do not reflect what they think. So that is the reason I would urge that the way the youth think is very good, but they don't take responsibility. They can crib about the governments. So you need to come into the mainstream politics, bureaucracy, etc., and try to mold the way you want the world to be, and not just sit on the sidelines and crib. That's it.
Absolutely. So I think, wonderfully, you've hit the nail on the head. And I'm so happy that, last suggestion, especially because, as a platform, the way we run a weekly series with educators, we also run a weekly series with the youth, where we tell the youth that we are going to hear from you. We want to give you a platform and your voice where you talk about what is your perspective on all the contemporary issues that are happening around. And not only share your perspective, but what are also your proposed solutions. The idea being that, we need to take accountability for the world we live in and the way we are operating it. We need to stop putting that blame on everybody else, but just say that, why don't I take that mantle to be a change maker in whatever capacity that I can have. I really think, sir, that, this has been such an inspirational conversation for us on so many levels. And I think all of us today are going back with so much food for thought to reflect on that what are the changes that we can make within our system. And obviously, I think, I speak on behalf of my audience here that we are also going with a newfound respect for the visionaries that we have on the policy front, like yourself, because it's really amazing to see the kind of perspective and the new wave of thought that you're bringing into the system today. And we really can't wait to see how this is going to all unfold from the starting point of 2022. And hopefully all will be settled by 2040. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time and joining us today. It's really been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a big thank you to all our viewers for joining us. We hope you had a great time, and we'll see you again on next Thursday at 5 p.m. Take care, everybody. Stay safe and mask up.